Hey, this is Anton over at thehyperadvisor.com. Today I want to go over the instant VM recovery. This is a new feature in PHP Virtual Backup, the version 6, which has recently been released. I have a beta copy here that I'm working with, and this feature is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and get into it. I have a lab environment here that I have set up. In the configuration tab, there is one part that you will need to configure, and that is, now you get this tab for instant VM recovery in the configuration tab, and you need to configure the storage location that you're going to use for this. And this is pretty similar to the backup storage screen. And you get the same options pretty much. You can go in here and you can say you don't want to use any. You can use and attach virtual disk, and if you do this, you go into configure, and if any disk are found on the virtual backup appliance here, you could go ahead and add that into the pool so it can be used for the instant VM recovery space. I don't have any storage to use for that, so what I've done is I'm using the option to utilize the storage that is being used for backups as well. So both backups and the instant VM recovery backups are going to happen on the same disk. So let's go to the instant VM recovery. So I made a change. I'm not gonna save this. Go to Instant VM Recovery tab here, and I'm going to run through the wizard to do a instant VM recovery and show you how this thing works a little in the detail here. The first wizard screen, you'll have to choose your virtual appliance. I only have one here for backups, and it gives you a little bit of information there, but we'll click next on here, and once we click next here, it'll show us all our virtual machines and then the backups that we can choose from to do this instant recovery of this VM. I'm going to go ahead and choose one of the VMs. This VM is still live, but the purpose of this is if your VM died for some reason and it needs to be restored, this is a faster way of restoring that virtual machine and getting it up and running. Pretty much it's going to restore or power on the virtual machine from the backup location, at least the data drives. I'll go a little bit more into detail on that there. So I'm going to select this time here that I want to get the backup from. That's the most recent one. Typically if you do this, it probably will be from the most recent, and I'm going to click next, and you get some options in here where one, you need to name the job. It's going to kick a job off that's going to need to run, and you can see the recovery type here is automatically selected for the instant recovery, which is what we want. You can also do the automatically start VHD motion seeding here. Now VHD motion is a feature they've added here with this instant VM recovery process for giving the customer the ability to basically do a storage vMotion. So when this instant recovery happens, it's going to be using the actual backup store for that data VMDK. So this gives you the ability to be able to restore the virtual machine in the background. So once it's, it sees that data, or it does its PHP vMotion, you're able to actually switch the virtual machine to use the production data store. So we're not going to select this here. I'm going to show how we can do this from the GUI. I'm going to actually put a suffix, VM name suffix, because I have the original out there still, and this is just going to append to the name of the actual virtual machine. I want to power the virtual machine on after it's recovered, and I'm not going to use the original storage and network settings. You'll see here where it says default VM storage and default VM network. Choose a network, of course, where once the VM power is on, it can be on a network and you can actually get to it. But the default VM storage, now I've said it's going to use the backup data to run the actual virtual machine. That's somewhat true. What happens is it creates the virtual machine on a data store in your production environment that you choose. I'm going to go ahead and choose this local one here. So it'll create the folder, it'll create the configuration files and the swap files and all the different virtual machine files that's needed in a production data store, but the data VMDKs will live in the backup store. So that's why we have to choose, a data store here. I'm going to automatically generate a new MAC address here, and I'm not going to connect that power on because I have the other virtual machine still there. So I just want to log into it if I want to change the network settings, and then I can attach the network card to that virtual machine. Going to click next, and then we get the wizard here where it just gives you a little bit of information here, and we can change the destination if we wanted to as well from here. It does have a little warning system here, so let me unselect the VM suffix here, and if I click next, you'll see that it puts a warning here because this name is already being used in Virtual Center. So that's pretty nice that it will at least give you a cue that you're going to be recovering a virtual machine that's currently already out there. So I'm going to go ahead and change the name. We're looking good here, and I'm going to submit this job. So it's going to go ahead and create the job and start the job, and what it's going to go ahead and do in the background here is start creating the virtual machine, reconfigure the virtual machine. We'll take a look into the actual parameters of what's configured on this virtual machine here when it's done. One thing I found, and let me see if we go back in here, we'll do current, is that so in this GUI here, and again, this is the beta version. This may be fixed in the GA version, I'm not sure or not, but it does not refresh automatically. So you will have to refresh this screen here in order to get the most current information. Small bug, but something that probably should be fixed if it's not fixed already. You will get the information here in the status, so once it's done it will indicate that the process is finished, and we can see here that the status is active here, so it is finished, the process of creating that virtual machine and powering it on. So if we go over here in the Virtual Center, here's the virtual machine. Let's go ahead and look at the configuration of this virtual machine just to get a little detail on how it's configured. If we go and look at the VMDK here for the hard drive with the data on it, we can see that it is using the VMDK from the actual backup store. This is not, of course, any of the data stores that I have in my production environment. If we take a look in here, none of those funky numbers there. So let me go into summary as well here. just to show that the VMDK, the actual VM virtual machine config files and everything will be in the production data store that you had to select during the wizard, and we can see those files here, but there is no VMDK file that sits in this directory. Again, that's running from the backup store. Now, I mentioned the PHP motion. We have the feature here. If you don't start it from the wizard, you do get the ability to be able to come in here and manually start that process. So I'll go ahead and start that process here, and we'll take a look at it again just to see what happens during this PHP motion seeding process here. So the window, the job actually changed. So this is somewhat good, where I mentioned the screen did not refresh before. So I'm not sure what's going on there. It did refresh here, but it doesn't seem to refresh for everything that you do with the instant VM recovery. So if we go into vCenter, you can go ahead and see that it's going in here. It's reconfigured reconfigured the virtual appliance for the backup. And if we go to the backup appliance here, what we should see is that it's created a VMDK in the recovery virtual machine that we have set here. And what it's doing, of course, is it's basically copying the production, well, the one from the backup store into the and created one for actually running in production the way it should be. So we'll go ahead and cancel out of here. This is going to take a little bit, so I'll come back when this is done. Okay, so the seeding is complete now. If we go into the virtual machine here and browse the main data store, the production data store, now we can see that there is a VMDK that's sitting here that can be used for this virtual machine. So now that the actual VMDK or the PHP motion has finished and copied over the VMDK to the production data store, the process is still not done yet. We will need to complete PHP motion in order to change the virtual machine from using the backup store to using the actual VMDK that was PHP motion over to the production data store. So if we go back in here and let's go ahead and select complete. Now to complete the PHP motion, you will have to shut down the virtual machine. So even though this is not the same as a storage free motion, it's still a process where you know, shutting down the virtual machine and then powering it back on is a quicker downtime than waiting for, you know, the full restore of the virtual machine. So the goal is to reduce the recovery time objective, get the virtual machine up and running, and then in the background go ahead and do the PHP motion, and then once that's done, you can have a shorter downtime of that virtual machine. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and power this virtual machine off. And we'll do a shutdown. guess shutdown of the virtual machine. So it'll go ahead and shut this down. What we could also do, or could have done, if we're licensed for storage vMotion, we could have actually done a storage vMotion instead of using the PhD motion process. That process is pretty simple. If you already have the feature, you've probably already used it, so I'm not going to run through that process of how to do a storage vMotion. But we'll go ahead and shut the box down, and once we come back in here and we do complete PhD motion, it will go ahead and do what it needs to do to the virtual machine. And if we look at the task here, it goes ahead and reconfigure it. Okay, so now after refreshing here, we can see that the job is done. There is no instant VM recovery, and this is because it actually went ahead and switched that virtual machine over. So it's technically not running from the backup store, and it is a virtual machine in the environment that can be used for production, running out of the production data store. If we go ahead and switch over, we can see some of the tasks that ran. It reconfigured the virtual backup appliance, so it of course has to detach the data store that it created to do the seeding, or not the data store, the VMDK to do the seeding, and then reconfigure the virtual machine and change over the VMDK it had configured with the new VMDK. So if we go in here and we edit that virtual machine, we can see now that it has changed to the production, or the VMDK that's sitting in the production data store. All you have to do now is power this virtual machine on, and basically that will be it. So this virtual machine will be ready for use, prime time use in production,